I am so excited today to bring you another amazing guest. And I'm really having fun today because I have not actually talked to her before today. And I've read her things, her articles, and watched her videos. And and we work with some of the same clients, and I hear such great things about her. And so I'm so excited to be talking to her today. I know you're going to be excited to listening today. And we're going to focus on a number of things, but loosely on her 10 tips, 10 rules for brilliant women. So if you're a brilliant woman and you're listening to this, you're going to get some great tips. But also, I know we have some men in our audience too. And if you mentor women or you sponsor women or you're married to a woman or you have women in your life who you care about, there's lots of reasons to listen to this too. This is going to be like going behind the scenes. I'm Black, as many of you know, and often my husband and I talk about going behind the curtain, getting to hear what Black people say when no one else is around. And this is like that chance to get to hear what women say to each other when no one else is around. So if you love women, if you mentor women, you support women, this is going to be helpful for you as well. So my special guest today is Tara Mohr, who is the author of Playing Big. She works with a lot of the same corporate clients that I do in terms of teaching leadership, women's leadership. She has great resources online that you can look at too, lots of blogs, lots of videos. And so there's lots that you can learn from her aside from this podcast. But I'm so excited to bring her here today and we're going to have a great conversation, right, Tara?
I'm so excited to be here and honored to get to talk with you.
Thank you. So I wanted to start with Playing Big is your book, and a lot of the work you do is really empowering and unleashing women's ability to play big. What are some of the reasons we don't play big? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, let me say that's the question I started with. What happened for me was about 10 years ago. I had started a small coaching practice on the side of another job, on the side of another career. And my clients were these incredible women. And for the listeners, you can think of, the friends you admire so much and you just think they're so brilliant, or you see how capable your daughters are, or the women on your team. Those were my clients, right? Those kinds of conscientious, hardworking, brilliant women. And as their coach, I immediately saw okay, she's ready to be CEO. She's ready to run for city council. The world would be a better place if women like them were in charge. And yet I also would hear from them in the intimacy and privacy of those coaching sessions. I kept hearing, yeah, but if that was a good idea, the idea I'm having, surely somebody would have thought of it already. Or maybe I'll go for that, but I'll probably be qualified in about 5 years. And this gap between what I could see in them and what I knew to be true and how they saw themselves was so striking and so painful. And I also could relate to it personally, because at that time, I was early in my career. I had a bunch of fancy Ivy League degrees. I had done really well as a student. I was doing well in my job. And I had every reason to feel confident, but I didn't. And that was very puzzling to me. I didn't know why. So kind of without having a better term for it, I started to call this thing that I saw in myself and in them playing small. And I didn't know what was causing it. And I didn't know what could cause us to get out of it. My first thought was, maybe we should all go to the therapist and discover what happened in our early childhoods under age 5 to tell us the answer, kind of like the Freudian approach. But very quickly, I saw from my clients, wait a second, this one had a wonderfully supportive family. This one had a critical family. This one was a star student in school. This one really struggled in school. And yet we're all landing with the same kind of self-doubt. So I threw out the theory that you could find some answer in our stories. And really what I would say keeps us from playing big has multiple layers. There's a universal human layer of, it is scary to go for our dreams. It's scary to be an individual in the world. It's scary to live our truth. That's kind of the universal level. And then for women in particular, there's a layer of, we learn it's risky to share our voices. We probably won't be liked. We'll probably be seen as less nice. It's risky maybe to, and we were just speaking a little bit about, particularly depending on your culture, maybe it's risky for you as a woman to make money. Maybe it's risky for you as a woman to be beautiful. So there's all kinds of things we
We
learn.
get the message too that a man is supposed to ask you to the prom. A man is supposed to ask you, you're not supposed to ask a man to marry you. If you have to ask a guy to marry you, you failed as a woman, right?
Right.
You're not doing it right, right?
Right.
There's this whole thing of waiting for men to ask is drummed into us, and Cinderella stories, all the fairy tales. Anyway, so yeah, as a woman, we get all these messages that somebody is supposed to save us or fix us.
Yeah. And somebody else is going to save the world. Somebody else knows what they're really talking about. So we're at this interesting historical moment where we have the opportunity to unlearn a lot of the lessons of the patriarchal culture. And that's how I think of that work of stepping into Playing Big. We're really unlearning a set of conditioning that maybe we got, maybe our moms or grandmothers got, and was handed down to us.
And I just wanted to add to that package that you just gave us too, the different layers of multicultural too. So when the not playing big, and I know you've worked with multicultural women too, is,
Yes.
do you see certain aspects of why Hispanic women don't play big as opposed to why Black women don't play big?
Yeah. And of course, even within each of those groups, there is huge diversity, right? There's diversity among geography and family of origin and class and religion that is intersecting with all of that. And so I, in a way, would hesitate to
Big generalities, yeah.
make generalities. Right. But what I would say is we want to think about, for any individual with their identity and family legacy, what kind of playing big did they learn was dangerous? And so, let's say for many white privileged women, it might look more like, well, earning a lot of money and being controversial is dangerous. For women, if you come from a legacy of long-term financial struggle and racialized financial struggle, maybe just the idea of considering a career you'd find really fun and joyful is terrifying and is really leaving your family legacy behind. Right.
And you hit a nerve for me there too. If you grew up with a lot of insecurity and racial issues, you think you're just looking for security. Like, what's going to help me have money? My family never had any money. Like, how am I just going to have money? Right. So you're not looking for satisfaction or fulfillment.
Right. Exactly. So we can think about, right, what messages did I get? And my definition of playing big is being more loyal to your dreams than to your fears.
Oh, I love that. I once did a series of focus groups with different, it wasn't all women, it was multicultural people. And it was about talking about your future. So just being able to talk about your vision, and why didn't people do that? And, and I think, like you said, there's the top layer, which is everybody's afraid of looking stupid. Like, if you talk about it, some big vision, and then you can't do it, you feel like a fool. So everybody has that. But there's additional layers for different groups. And for women in general, I think it was perfectionism was huge, as you know. I mean, I know you work on that a lot, is they wanted to get it right. So I'm going to talk about my future, I better get it right. And they also had a fear of sounding arrogant. And a lot of women are accused of being arrogant, right? And so one of the things I say is, if you don't talk about your future like you know exactly perfectly what it's going to be, then you won't sound arrogant. So you can be a little playful. But with the multicultural women, there were different pressures too. And I think Hispanic women had a lot of pressures about extended family. So if I just have this idea of where my career is going to go, but I'm going to take my children away from their grandparents, that's not okay in my culture. That's not considered, getting ahead. That's just not good. So there was that sense of, I've got to manage my whole extended family before I can get ahead. And for Asian women, it was more about family pride, that I can't embarrass my family. If I say I'm going to do this and then I don't, then I embarrass my family name. And for Black women, it was more about permission, that I need permission to be successful. And are they going to let me be successful? So anyway, just saying that there's, and again, those things don't apply to everybody. You know, there's some people who are very successful and they do dream big and they do, you know, so this is not universal, but these are just some of the pressures that people experience for women and across different cultures too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating.
So playing big, there's a lot of pressures not to play big for women, but then you've done a lot of work to help women find the strength to do that. So let's unpack some of that, some tips on how to play big, and so it can help our women who are listening and the men who love them and want to help them.
Yes, yeah. Well, the very first thing we start with is getting to know and quieting your inner critic, because this is like the number one thing for so many women, and it again shows up differently depending on culture and conditioning. But just the notion that we all have an inner critic voice, that's kind of a first revelation for people, because most of us are living with the background music of a voice of self-criticism, whether it's talking about the size of your body or the shape of your body, or I'm a fraud and I'm about to be found out, or I'm not qualified for that. And we think that's the voice of truth. And we also kind of take it on, if we are aware of it, we take it on like, oh, I'm not a confident person and I'm supposed to be a confident person, or successful people are confident people. And I take a very different approach to that, which is that we all have an inner critic. And especially if you are from a identity that is underrepresented or still coming into full representation in the professional and political sphere, you're gonna hear that inner critic. And we actually don't have to get rid of it. We don't have to become confident, but we do have to have a more skillful relationship with it. And there are practices that can help us do that. So we start there.
I just want to say, I remember talking to the woman who wrote Eat, Love, Pray. And
yes, Eat, Pray, Love, yeah.
Yeah, she described this whole funny thing about taking her inner critic in the minivan as she went on a journey. Like, I'm going to go on this journey in life, and I'm just going to like give my inner critic the map to try to keep it busy. But I'm going to, you know, it's like you can't throw the inner critic out of the car, but you just like try to keep them busy and then keep going. You know, it was just, she's hilarious.
Yes. Liz, I love Liz Gilbert. And she has that great thing about fear, putting it in the passenger seat. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the name of the game is not becoming confident. The name of the game is having a more wise and skillful relationship with our self-doubt. And it's fascinating to hear the narratives of women at the top of their field, the top of their careers, talk about, Cherry Murray, who's the first female dean of engineering at Harvard, says, I still feel unqualified for my job every day. Or Twyla Tharp, the choreographer, saying, every time I start a new dance, I'm sure this is the one where the audience is going to walk out laughing because my talent has run out.
Oh my gosh.
So the evidence is really clear. And often we master and come to a sense of confidence on one area in our lives, but the inner critic chatters really loud about whatever's at the edge of our comfort zone. So that whole domain of getting skills to work with your inner critic is really key for moving out of playing small. The next thing we usually look at, should I keep going?
Just before you get off that, you just reminded me of something too, is when my daughter, this must be like 15 years ago, my daughter was relatively young, and a friend of mine who I worked with was standing in my kitchen, and she said to me, you were never afraid of anything. You never backed down from anything. You know, you have one leg, you went skiing, you did all these things. And I looked at her and I thought, no, I was afraid of everything. That's not true that I wasn't. I may look that way to other people, but I said, oh, you know what I think it was is fear became my best friend. I was afraid of learning how to walk. I was afraid of traveling. I was afraid of skiing. I was afraid of everything, but I just stopped trying to get fear to go away. Right. It's just, hey, fear, let's go. Let's go do this, you know?
And what do you do in the moment that allows you to do that?
Actually, when I had that discussion with my friend in the kitchen, she said, you were never afraid. She said, I backed down from fear so many times. And in that moment, I looked at her and I said, you mean backing down was an option? I didn't know that. And I think part of it was my mother was a really strong woman and she just made me do things. But it was also, if you're going to walk and you only have one leg, you're going
Right.
to walk with fear. You're either going to walk with fear or you're not going to walk.
Yeah.
And, there were just so many things that my family was poor. And so there were so many things where if you were going to do anything, you were
Yeah.
just going to take fear by the arm and go, because there was no other way to do it. I was either going to just lay down and sit in the corner, or I was going to take fear on a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me of, I don't know if you ever came across this study, the study that was done about the ostensible topic was financial literacy. So they had like basically a financial quiz, about various topics of investing and saving. And it was a global study. And they had this like odd finding where in some of the responses, there was a gender gap where women had performed worse than the men on the test. But then in other parts of the sample, there wasn't. And they were trying to figure out what happened. And they realized that in different version changes, what had happened was some versions included in this multiple choice quiz, they had I'm not sure option. Like you could choose, I'm not sure. And then in the other versions, there was no, I'm not sure. You just had to get it right or wrong. And when they got rid of the, I'm not sure, the women performed as well as the men.
Wow.
But given the I'm not sure option, because they didn't feel 100% confident, like you're saying, I can't exactly predict my future, they would choose I'm not sure and like miss out on the opportunity, right, to take a little risk and find out how right they were. So yeah, the options we have matters. And the trick is like, when we have the option to not walk with fear, how do we kind of get ourselves into the frame of mind where we do it anyway?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm the one-legged Black woman from a poor family. So it was either you walk with fear or you don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Interesting.
and privilege can be a challenge because it can make it harder for you to learn to take risks and have a thick skin.
The thick skin. Yeah. Yeah. So we can talk about that a little bit. That's one of the rules for brilliant women, to have a thick skin and get really used to criticism and praise. And this was something in my coaching practice was really surprising to see, that people would come in with some topic that they thought was their issue. Like their issue is, oh, my boss is bad in this way, or my issue is it's time for a career change. And often when we dig a little deeper in the surface, underneath the surface, what became clear was they were having a challenge that had to do with either being so praise seeking, they could not actually be innovative in their work,
Because
or
they didn't
being,
want to take a risk.
yeah,
If you really need all that praise, you can't fail.
you can't fail, you can't make controversial decisions, you can't lead a company through difficult change, right? So either so praise seeking or so wounded by criticism or afraid of potential criticism, that's the same thing. They were just operating within a really narrow zone. So that's become a big theme of how I work with women. We look at like, what's your relationship to feedback? And the principle that I love to share with people, that it always gets a ton of raised eyebrows in corporate environments because it goes against the culture around feedback, is feedback can never tell us anything about ourselves. It only tells us about the person giving the feedback. And I really believe this, right? And we know, particularly thinking about your audience, feedback is laden with bias. It's laden with stereotypes. Black women are going to get told they're angry, and the same behavior would not get described that way on a different person, right? Asian women are going to get told they're too quiet. Men are going to get told they're visionary with the same behavior that someone else would be told is abrasive
or arrogant. Yeah.
Or arrogant, right? So it's laden with bias. And then even when there's not identity-based bias, the truth is, right, that the feedback we give someone is really about our experience of them. And when we start to see feedback that way, to say, oh, that tougher performance review I got, or this client's reaction to me, that was actually very interesting information about them. And that doesn't mean I dismiss it. I still might take it really seriously, but I take it seriously as strategically useful information to help me work with them effectively if I need to do that, or if I want to do that, rather than as a verdict on me. And that's so, so important for our playing big.
That's fascinating. There was a study that I saw that had performance reviews of women, and 75% of the performance reviews of the women had criticisms of their personality, and something like 3% of the performance reviews of men had criticisms of their personality. And when aggressive was used for men, it was a compliment, not so much for the women.
Yes, yes.
But the kicker with that was that the performance, there was no difference between whether there was a man or a woman reviewing the woman.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and as you know, that women can be so hard on women too, is that it's almost like we're trying to police each other to stay within these boundaries, right?
Yes. Yeah, I know. I love that study. That's Kieran Snyder and Fortune did that study. And it's such a brilliant one in terms of how they did the semantic analysis of the performance reviews. And yes, this is, I think, something people don't talk about enough, because often when we're talking about women's empowerment, there's this assumption that the stumbling block is men. And that's not what the research tells us at all. And I believe that we'll never honor in another woman what we can't honor in ourselves. And we'll never allow in another woman what we can't allow in ourselves.
And your 10th rule in the 10 rules for brilliant women, the 10th rule is let other women know they're brilliant, and let other women be brilliant, right? Give them the space, the freedom to be
That's
brilliant.
the harder part for us, I think, because whatever we have tamped down or are in conflict with in ourselves, which is a lot of our own power and voice, right? We're not going to allow in other women. And you can even see how this plays out with our female candidates, right? Like how women's reactions to our female candidates, particularly white women's reaction to them. So, so that's why it's actually very linked. Like if we're not doing our own work with ourselves, and do I give myself permission to be louder and braver? If I don't do that, I'm not going to be able to support that millennial woman that I'm managing when she comes in with an idea. I might pretend I can, but I can't.
I love what you're saying about feedback, but there is part of me that cries out to say, well, you can't just reject all the feedback you get.
You're not rejecting it, but you're incorporating it as information about the people you want to reach, rather than information about you. So in other words, if your client comes to you and says, you know, Bonnie, we feel like the program, like we love the tone of it, but we just feel like there needs to be more intensive curriculum learning. Okay. So if you make that about you, you might feel like, see, I knew I wasn't really cut out for this kind of corporate work, or, you know, I am just making it up, but whatever, as I go along, and whatever we would do, the story we would make up with about that. And that's not going to be helpful to you. If I take that as information about that client, right? I'm about to have an opportunity to learn something about what they want here and what their vision is and what they value in this program. And if I can see it that way, I'm actually, instead of, I think of, the 2 Ds, when we make feedback about ourselves, we either go to devastated or defensive.
Right. Right.
I'm horrible or you're horrible.
So the feedback really is about, how do I work with that person's success?
Yes.
So it's good feedback to take on board. It's good feedback to make it actionable, but it's really just about, how do I work with that person?
That's right.
I love that. Okay, that makes sense.
Because if you're in a different,
you're not saying ignore feedback. This is really important for anybody listening. We're not saying that. We're saying that's information about how to work successfully with that person.
Yes. Yes. However, I would also say for women, when we go through that process, one of the steps we pause at is this feedback relevant to my goals?
Right.
Which is a step that in general women skip, because we're socialized that to be a nice, kind person is to somehow incorporate everyone's feedback into everything.
We have to please everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes the answer is no, like, oh, that feedback from that one outlier on my 360, not relevant. Or, that one client that I'm not going to deal with again, not relevant. But if yes, it is relevant to your goals, then yeah, you want to incorporate it.
So on the list of 10 things, 4 is get a thick skin, and 5 is be an arrogant idiot. So so let's talk about being an arrogant idiot.
Yeah. So this was, when I wrote this, this was sort of, if I could have taken off my coach's hat, because as a coach, you you're Miss Neutral, I'm Miss Questions, I'm Miss Calm. So this was like, if I actually could just take off my coach's hat and kind of shake my clients by the shoulder to get the world I want with women leading, I would say, be an arrogant idiot. And of course, I know that you're not going to be an arrogant idiot and that our listeners are not going to be arrogant idiots, but I think we can afford to move a few more inches in their direction. And that what we feel would make us an arrogant idiot is actually totally appropriate forms of owning our intelligence and our power.
I love it. And you know what though is you're kind of saying a lot of guys are willing to be an arrogant idiot and just say, I own the world, I run the world, and talk like that and walk like that. Now, as realistically as women, if we showed up exactly like those arrogant idiot guys,
right,
it would not work for us though, because it wouldn't be received well.
Generally not. Mm-hmm.
So, but you're saying even if you tell somebody to be an arrogant idiot, they're really not going to.
They're never going to get all the way over there anyway.
Yeah.
It's too far, and their conditioning won't allow it. But they can scoot closer. Yeah.
As you're saying all this too, I'm just thinking about, the things I've done where I've shown up and I interviewed for that job in the White House, even though I'd never worked on a campaign before, like a lot of my friends.
I can't tell you how many times people have been like, I applied for that job. Sure, I wasn't qualified and I got it, or I got the fellowship, or I got the award, because our self-assessment is really off. And that is something, the research shows really consistently that women underestimate their abilities more. And then at the same time, we're in the pool often with white men who are overestimating their abilities.
What's the famous statistic about if there's 10 criteria for a job, a woman will have 9 and say, well, I better not apply because I don't have all 10, and a man will have 3 out of 10.
Yeah. And it's an anecdote from an HB report, which is interesting. It's often misquoted it's not an actual statistic. It's kind of an anecdote that's become this folklore. But I was really interested in that statistic, and I did some research on it, asking women. We surveyed a few thousand women. If you have applied for a job, if you chose not to apply for a job because you read the list of qualifications and you didn't meet them, like, why did you not apply? Was it because you didn't think you could get the job? Was it because you thought it would offend, the people? Because I was really interested to get underneath that.
Yeah. Or do you think you could get the job? You didn't think you could do the job, or you thought you would offend somebody? Yeah. So
what it turned out was the number one thing was I just believed that list was true. In other words, I believed those were real job requirements. And that I think is really important, because another piece here that we haven't talked about yet, and it's, I think, super relevant for high achieving women of color, is what happened in our training in school and all the things that are good girl, good student habits. One of them is following the rules and believing the rules, right? Believing that the rules are somehow real. So the truth is, when a company writes a list of job qualifications, a lot of times those aren't real requirements. But women are more likely to think that they are, because we've been socialized to follow rules really well, and we know how to do that.
You said something about multicultural differentials too, and I'm just wondering if multicultural women tend to be more rule followers or less rule followers. And I'm just filtering my own experience too, and I know a lot of people of color who are very afraid to break the ruls, and it's almost like the thing, if you're afraid the policeman's going to shoot you, it's that you better follow the rules if you're not white.
Yes, right. It's I think there's multiple things at play there for people of color. One is the risks of not following the rules are higher, right? The potential backlash or penalization of that is higher. And we learn that really early on, right? In all kinds of ways. There's also that whole thing of my only possible route in is by working really hard and meeting every criteria. So I'm going to do it just right.
Yeah, women feel that pressure. All women feel that pressure. And then multicultural women and multicultural men feel that pressure a lot too, right? Yeah. I better follow the lines really, really, really well, or somebody will disqualify me. Oh, you didn't follow the rules. So
exactly. And then what does that mean? So if you did that for 20 years in school to even have a shot, what happens then if you get into a corporate environment and you're reading, the document about how promotions are supposed to happen and thinking if I do A, B, and C, right, then I'll be in the line for promotion. But actually, there's a whole lot going on that has nothing to do with the rules and a lot to do with relationships and politics and all of that. That is how they happen. So we have to kind of add as much as we can to our good student toolkit, this other set of skills.
And what about bragging, telling and
Yeah.
selling your value? We talk a lot about that in our leadership course that we teach, but women are socialized that you can't brag.
Yeah. And I find even if I say the word self-promotion, it's like people kind of fall out of their chairs, like, don't ask me, I cannot do that. Like, I will not be that guy, I will not be that guy. So what I always invite people to do is get rid of the term self-promotion. You never have to use that again. You never have to think about that again. Instead, I like to offer to people the word visibility. So think about, who is your good work visible to? And who does your good work need to be visible to get where you want to go? And sometimes visibility is just a different frame, right? Like, instead of, oh, I need to self-promote, it's like, is it even visible to anyone what I'm doing over here at my desk? No.
And if you're working, if you're heads down working through lunch every day and you never talk to anybody, how do you expect them to know? Are they mind readers?
Yeah. So how do you make your good work visible? And then also a big road in for a lot of women will be, is there a way I can think of to make my work visible that's also of service to others? So so if I'm doing something really interesting on my team, maybe we've come up with a great feedback process. Let me have a brown bag lunch and share that with others. Or if my team accomplished something, let me highlight that like crazy, but I'm going to do it as a way of also highlighting all the people on my team to, people senior to me. So that can really help it feel less self-focused for people.
What I find myself saying that's very similar is help others to help you. That if you want them to help you, it's not fair to just expect them to jump up and read your mind and know everything you've done. Package something and hand it to them it's like throw them the ball so they can run down the field. But help them to help you. And women can digest that easier, that, okay, I'm helping them to help.
Right.
And I'm not,
that's great.
I'm not expecting them to jump over my desk and read what's on my desk to help me, right? That's too hard. You're expecting them to do too much to help you. So make it easy to help them. Yeah.
That's great. I love that framing. Yeah.
I love yours too. So I'll steal yours and you can steal mine.
Trade. We'll do a trade.
And we'll make the whole world better. So, wow. So filtering advice and recovering and restore are two more that are on your list.
Yeah. Well, and we talked a little bit about one aspect of filtering advice, which is, check, is this feedback relevant? And a part of that too is a lot of women, we're thinking of a career change. We ask our sister, we ask our mom, we ask our dear moms, we ask our friend. And a part of the Playing Big process a lot for people is that increased turning inward and reminding ourselves that a lot of times other people have advice for us that's very well intentioned, but maybe not right for us, maybe coming out of their fears. So filtering advice. And another thing we do in the Playing Big model, it's a big part of the book, and that this is actually one of the things that in our evaluations, this is one of the most sort of treasured tools for Black women specifically, and also women of color more broadly, which is to, we call it discovering your inner mentor. It's about doing a little guided meditation, and we can give people a link for it, that helps them meet their self about 20, 25 years out into the future. And when people really relax and go into that meditative space, it's quite amazing what they encounter. It's kind of like meeting your own inner elder wise woman. And then that becomes your key mentor. That's who you ask your questions to. And you will get answers. It's really amazing. And particularly, right, for women of color, usually a mentor that would actually reflect their identity and their unique personal dreams and whose path they, really can make sense in the current historical moment we're in, that person is going to be very hard to find. So we have our external mentors, and they're wonderful for hearing their stories and some of the tactical help that mentors can provide, but they really can't replace that inner mentor voice. That's where we're going to ask our deepest questions.
I love that, because your inner critic is, the person telling you you can't do it and dragging you down, but the inner mentor is that person, is a vision of yourself in the future having already succeeded. Well, what advice would that person give you?
Exactly.
And so it can't possibly be don't try.
No, she won't say that. And she usually does say something kind of surprising that we wouldn't come to on our own. And I love that you brought in the inner critic, because we always also talk about, thing is, the inner critic will interrupt you and invade your thinking all the time. Your inner mentor won't. You have to actually go seek her out. She doesn't usually jump in. She's pretty quiet and very respectful of like, I'll share if you ask. Right.
Wow.
So we need a practice to check in with her.
I gotta try that. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I know I have read some things about that from your work, but I just had never really done it. So, and we are going to share some links that we'll put wherever you got this podcast. We'll put it with the description of this podcast so that you can have some links. And you can always just go to, it's taramohr.com, right?
Yeah.
And it's Mohr is Mohr, just
yes.
if you're listening. So lots of great resources, and really practical too. So filtering advice, making sure you're getting advice from the believer in yourself as well as outside yourself. Yes. And then number 9 was recover and restore.
Yeah. The more we understand about stress, right? We understand, and you as an athlete, right, understand this so well, like stress is okay, but chronic stress is really damaging. And playing big is a certain kind of stress. It's not the same as sitting in traffic stress or, really upsetting, tragic things happening in our community stress, but it takes a certain, right, presence and walking with the fear. That's a stressor. So we want to understand we're not going to do that 24 hours a day. And we want to have the activities that are like coming back home. And that can be going to a dance class, or just cozying up on the couch with a loved one, or, taking your dog out on a hike or whatever. But whatever the things are for you, and knowing what they are for you that truly restore you. And the truly is important, because a lot of times too, I think the culture feeds us an image of what restoration is supposed to look like, especially for women. We're supposed to find it at the, getting our nails done, or we're supposed to find it with this friends in this way. But the question is like, what truly is the restoration for you?
Yeah. And, I wrote a book on resilience as well. And so I'm fascinated by this question too of, bouncing back. And the book I wrote was micro resilience. So it's little tiny things we can do. And so what you're describing too are some of the things that feed your soul, some of the bigger things. And so I think we do need a range of things. We need the big things that restore us in really fundamental ways that keep us on track for the long haul. And then we need little restorations during the day too. And it could be, taking a walk outside if you work in a building, or drinking water, or, it can be little things and big things. And I think all of those are important. All of those restorations are really important, especially for women.
Yeah. So great. So yeah, I love that point about sometimes it's a few deep breaths, and because we need to restore from the phone call that just happened. And yeah.
I could talk to you for hours, Tara. And I know I'm so glad this is the first time we've really connected. But we need to connect again offline. And I'd love to help you in any way I can with the work you're doing. It's so important that you are helping women to play big. And that's just, there's a lot of efforts being made in different companies right now to promote women and to build women's leadership. But we need to build the women themselves. And that's so much of what you're doing too. And I love that work too, is we got to fix the environment, but we also have to strengthen the women who are the ones who are plowing the way, who are the trailblazers.
That's right. It's really both hand in hand, and they're so symbiotic with each other.
Great. Well, any last words? I know we need to wrap up. We're going to give people a link so they can go look at your 10 rules for brilliant women. And we've talked about most of them. But any last words you want to leave people with?
I just want to thank you so much for having me and say this conversation was a delight. I'm honored to get to talk to you, and I'm such a champion and fan of the work you're doing too. And so I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Likewise, I think we're definitely on the same team,
Yes,
and just the lifting women up team and making the world a better place. So thank you for
absolutely.
being on the
Thank
team.
you.